All right. So welcome to our final session of day 4 of Bauman Winter Wellness Week. We are offering winter spices with Emiko Luisi and Neeta Merchant. So we're so excited. This is I think kind of a continuation of a workshop that's been done in the past about spices. And so we're just so excited to have you back and offering this again, and look forward to the new information that we'll learn from both of you.
Thank you for joining us. My name is Emiko Luisi. I'm a nutrition consultant, board certified, and I am part of the Bauman Wellness team. I love to work with food and different flavors, and I believe in food as medicine. And I welcome you to come by our Bauman Wellness Mighty Network. It's the forum where we're there to get to know one another and to share information and offer community and support.
My name is Neeta Merchant. I'm also one of the Bauman moderators and facilitators with the Bauman Wellness. I'm also a holistic nutrition consultant and a laughter yoga instructor. I have laughter yoga sessions here in these events that we have for Bauman Wellness. I live in Irvine, Southern California, and love to be here, and welcome everyone.
Yes, and I do want to mention that we're both holistic nutrition consultants or practitioners. So if our vibe, if our information and vibe resonates with you, then please come join us in the community and have a chat with us. So on that note, I wanted to say that, as Christine had mentioned, last time we were able to have this workshop, Neeta and I were together and in person. It was a lot of fun. We did a chai workshop with obviously with Neeta's cultural background being Indian. I wanted to take advantage of asking all the questions about using spices and what spices and why, and we had a great session. So we thought we'd try this again. And unfortunately, we're not together in the same room. I really enjoy Neeta's company. And together, I think it's a dynamic, fun time that we have together. But we'll try to replicate that experience as much as we can this time. But we just wanted to cover about some spices and herbs that pretty much are kind of a lot in line with the chai spices, but with different uses this time. So this recipe that we dropped the recipe link or the link to the PDF in the chat, but if you do not receive it, please let me know. I had also mentioned that there'll probably be a version 2, as I realized that we hadn't included the recipe for the ghee in the recipe. So that'll be coming, and that will be available on our Mighty Network forum. So this is a holiday spice ghee. The recipe has been, I should say, the recipe is one that I share from my teacher, Cammie McBride, from her book about herbs and spices. And the book is called The Herbal Kitchen. And I'm just going to share this with you. And for anyone who loves herbs and spices, this is such a great book to have on the shelf. It's very easy. Her recipes are quite simple and very adjustable to your tastes. She has many wonderful recipes that involve all kinds of different spices and herbs. And this is one of my, I really enjoy this particular recipe during the holidays. So it's basically a holiday spice ghee. And the key word here really is simplicity, because we're all so busy during the holidays. But I really think the flavors pack a nice punch into our kind of base ingredient of ghee, and it just really takes it up a notch, and you can add it to your foods into different ways, into your gluten-free bread or into your bread or pancakes if you do, things of that nature. So the recipe itself is 1 cup of ghee, and to that we add some powdered cinnamon, some powdered fennel, and powdered anise, and powdered nutmeg. And I have the proportions in the handout. So basically we warm up the ghee and we add the spices in, and that is all that is involved. And we stir the spices. And once the ghee starts to set, then we stir it again to kind of redistribute the spices. And these spices are all very, has a very holiday feel and warming. You can also add different other optional spices such as cardamom or clove and powdered ginger. And so it sounds like people on the call are pretty familiar with ghee, but Neeta, do you would like to start the discussion? Because ghee is something from your culture, and if you'd like to share with us about your experiences with ghee and maybe how you grew up with ghee, and then we could talk about how to actually make the ghee.
Oh, okay. Definitely ghee is the contribution from India. It's basically it's clarified butter. That's what it is, and you can make it in a simpler way nowadays. But in ancient times, in the previous, like our ancestors, like my grandma and all that stuff, what they would do is they would actually you would have the fresh cow milk, and then what they would do is the cream that comes on top of it, they would actually churn that cream, and that's how they would make the butter out of it. And then once the butter is made, and then they would liquefy it, that it turns into ghee. Now, ghee was the one that was used all the time for all your cooking that we do, instead of using all the other shortenings or anything like that. At that time, of course, we did not have all that stuff. And then came up with all these processed ghees also, and oils and all that. So people started turning towards that. But clarified ghee is something which is simple that we can make. I normally get like a organic Irish, it's called Kerrygold butter. It just has an amazing taste to it. I've seen the difference if I take the regular unsalted butter, or if I take this Kerrygold, there is a huge difference in the taste.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's very simple to make. So we use more of that. And of course, if you're making any kind of sweets, ghee is used in that, because it gives the same way how in Western countries over here, we use butter more.
Mm-hmm.
But butter is more solidified, whereas ghee is more clarified butter.
Right. Yeah, and we should probably just clarify that ghee is cooked butter, basically. So you have butter that, like Neeta, I mean, I would wish I had grown up with freshly churned butter. That sounds wonderful. But butter is the raw form, right, of cream that's been churned and the liquid separated from the fat. And ghee is where you cook that same butter, and it's further clarified so that you are separating the butter fat from whatever amount of water and milk proteins and casein that's in the butter. So you're separating that out from the butter fat, and by cooking it, we separate those items out, and we're left with pure butter fat, which is essentially the healthful components that a lot of people that we look for in butter. And I would also say that fat is what feeds or nourishes us. So ghee, which Neeta had said is essentially clarified butter. It's a form of clarified butter. It's cooked a little longer than clarified butter, so that and correct me if I'm wrong, Neeta, but ghee is where you cook it a little longer and the milk solids fall, and you wait till it turns brown on the bottom of the pan. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And that's what I generally do.
Yeah,
but
it separates out the lactose part of it, right?
That's right.
So you don't have any lactose anymore left.
That's right.
So, and that's what you're doing. You're straining that out, all the brown pieces. But you also have to, when you're making ghee, you have to make sure that it is kind of like, it can burn very fast. Once it burns, then it just is not good anymore. So.
Right. And so the process of actually making ghee is to start with a pound or half pound of cold butter, or whatever amount really you can, but I would suggest starting with a half pound or a pound of cold butter into a saucepan. And we're going to melt that butter. And then the butter, and like Neeta had said, on low heat. I like to kind of get it going. So I have it kind of medium high. And then once I start to see the bubbles kind of coming up, then I turn it down to a simmer. Or a little bit more than a simmer. Would you say, Neeta, for you? I don't know. For me, I do cook my butter for a while. So I don't know if you put on lower heat setting, but I do put it on a lower heat setting, like a simmer. And if I see that it needs more heat, then I might adjust it. But I will look for the foaming that happens. So once the butter starts to cook, there's a foaming that happens, and that's usually the water, and it kind of starts to evaporate off. And then you will start to see the milk proteins kind of settle to the bottom. and then you're left with the butter fat on top, right? So the milk proteins that settle to the bottom, you can actually separate it at that time as clarified butter. But if you want to make ghee, then you wait for those milk proteins that have settled at the bottom to brown a little bit more. So, and then the oil also cooks a little longer, and it has a slightly more nutty aroma. Would you say, Neeta? For me, it does. But I'm just curious from a more authentic perspective. But,
right. Yes, it does.
Right. So then we filter that out. We have some kind of muslin cloth or some kind of filtering. And then you would filter all those milk solids out and you pour it into a heat-proof jar or container. And essentially you're left with the butter fat, and that is your ghee. Let me see, about how long do you cook it? So I cook it a long time. So if it's clarified butter, it cooks fairly fast. I would say maybe 20, 30 minutes, or maybe even shorter than that. But I tend to cook mine a little longer because I really enjoy that nutty aroma of kind of a long cook. So I have sometimes done up to 45 minutes to an hour of a low simmer for me. I know.
Oh, wow.
I know. It's totally radical. And actually my ghee tastes a little more caramel-like in some ways because I've let it cook for so long, and I really enjoy the flavor. And I should also mention, like Neeta had said, I just want to highlight that you can also use ghee in both savory and sweet applications, right? So I use it in savory cooking all the time as well. So yeah, wow is right. It's an and I will say that the hour actually happened. It was more out of neglect than for me,
it's 5 to 10 minutes. I mean, but what I do is also I don't cook. I don't take a lot. Like also, like I put it in the chat. It depends upon what's the amount that is being made. Like if you're using half a pound to 1 pound, that's going to take a little longer. But I normally just take small slabs, and that's pretty much it. Because I don't keep it for so long because it can become I wouldn't say it gets rancid, but what happens is especially in the summertime. When the more heat is there, so it can go bad. So I normally just try to make just a little bit, and that's pretty much it. Like make a small jar, and I'm okay. I mean, it lasts for me for about a month or so.
So I make like a pound and sometimes I make up to 5 pounds at a time.
Oh, wow.
And I store it in the refrigerator, but once it's out, I leave it out because it is considered shelf stable. Ghee is shelf-stable because it's just butter fat. But of course, I agree with you. I don't leave it out too much in the summertime, and you have to be, just conscious of where you are, if it's quite, moist or hot wherever you are. But I do tend to leave mine out, and I make a lot of time. And this is kind of Em's process here, but I do try to time it with either the full moon or the new moon. Or sometimes the solstices. So I do plan to make some tomorrow as well. But it just has an element of nature magic to it for me. So on that note, you can see now the differences between the two processes. And I will say that the neglect, it was funny. I've cooked it for a long time and I really enjoyed the flavor, and it kind of was a mistake, but I've done it intentionally after that because the flavor was that much tastier for me. So, and the ghee that I shared with that, people seem to really like it because it has almost this like nice, just a nutty, but slightly caramely type
smoky, kind of like smoky flavor.
Not smoky. No, not smoky. Because I simmer it, I'm not burning it. So I'm just simmering it. So it wasn't smoky. And I will say that it just fills our home with this lovely aroma of butter, and nothing brings out people from the rooms faster than that smell. Everybody's like, what is cooking?
Yes.
That's ghee. So on that note, ghee is wonderful. It is beautiful, and people can use it. A lot of folks that are paleo tend to use ghee because it's considered kind of dairy free, if you will. Some people don't, and that's totally up to you. But I will say that the fat in that ghee is wonderful for us. It has the vitamins like A, D, and E, and K. It has a high smoke point so that when you're cooking, you can actually, like in savory applications, or like Neeta mentioned, in sweet applications where you can bake with it, The ghee holds very well. So butter might burn when you're cooking, but ghee will hold, right? Go hold the heat. And it's also very digestible. So for people who don't do well with dairy or who don't do well with fats, and I'm one of those people that I cannot do dairy, but I can tolerate ghee. Actually, not tolerate. I feel great using ghee. I feel fine, and I can notice the difference in my body and also in my skin when I use ghee. And speaking of skin, I have actually applied it topically before because it just smelled so lovely that I went and applied it topically, and it was great. So, moving along.
Let me just bring up one point here too.
Sure.
If just to ghee has great yes, it has it is a saturated fat, but at the same time it is the same thing like coconut too, but it also has a weight loss dimension to it. If you have it early in the morning, the first thing, like either 1 spoon of coconut oil or ghee, that actually helps lubricating your joints and all that stuff. Of course, anything you should not be taking, it has to be taken in moderation. If you go on having a big ghee and all that stuff, that's not good either, because it turns into fat a lot more. Your body needs only certain amount. I had gone to a retreat in India, and there was an Ayurvedic treatment that I was going over there. And in this treatment, what they do is there is a diet that they give you. And when I had gone, so they were very specific about what I was supposed to eat for that detoxing part of it. They brought 2 tablespoons of ghee and they left it with our meal, and that they said that you have to consume it. It's like, oh my God, how are we going to consume this ghee? Because just by itself, you can't. So they said that, no, you can, this is your meal. You can go ahead and put it in there. That's totally okay. So then that was fine, because we could put it in the rice, or you can put it in the dal, or you can put it in the roti, we call roti, which is basically wheat tortilla. So once you're doing that, but you can have it in the daytime. You should not have it at nighttime, because what happens is in the nighttime, you're not that active, right? Your energy levels go. In the daytime, you are a lot more active, and your energy is being used. So it is highly recommended that you have it in the daytime, because if you have it at nighttime, then it is basically sitting in and it's turning into fat. So just wanted to bring this up.
Thank you, Neeta. I think that's awesome. I just learned something there. Wow, that is so interesting. And in the comments, Christine has mentioned she has heard of putting into the coffee.
Yes.
So into your morning beverage, would that be okay?
Yes, that is the reason why it is done in the morning, because people who want to have coffee, they can put this ghee in there, or they can put coconut oil in there too. Some of them use coconut oil. So what it is doing is it's actually helping you, the fat that you need for the whole day energy that you need, and it also uses it gives you the lubrication too. So.
Awesome. I'd love to see raised hands, hearts, or something in the chat box if you just learned something. I think it's kind of like the original bulletproof coffee that from thousands of years ago. We're bringing it back now, but I feel like that's the original form of bulletproof, where you use instead of MC2 or something. But now I like the idea of using ghee in my morning beverage. I'm a green tea drinker, but
sorry. Chris, even the golden milk that we nowadays are getting a lot, even in that, if you put it,
that's right.
Is excellent, because it has so many qualities to it. It has the antioxidant, antiviral, and all kinds of different things, properties in there. So. Yes.
Yeah. And, Neeta, I don't know if there's an equivalent, but I often see the word with ghee or clarified butter, but particularly with ghee, I see the words liquid gold attached, kind of like does that make sense for you? Is that how it's considered in Indian culture? And also an extension of that would be Ayurveda, right? So what you're describing are, I think, Ayurvedic practices of using healing, ghee as a healing food, really. Well, I just wanted, if you can share your thoughts on that. before we launch into the spices?
Yeah, like I said before, like ghee was the main shortening that was used for any type of cooking that you're doing, any dishes that you're doing, whether it's savory or you're making any sweets and all that stuff. But if you look at in Ayurveda, because ghee has always been part of the Indian culture, so definitely a lot of foods that is there, research that has been done, we were brought up with all those things, not realizing, not knowing all these other qualities and the nutrients that was there. But it definitely, and when I went for Ayurvedic treatment over there, and I saw that they would give you a lot more ghee, but it would always be in the daytime or in the morning.
I see. Right. And I think it's an important note to share, is that this part of your culture, it's woven into your culture. It's not a separate thing. It's not like Ayurvedic is separate, but it's actually part of your daily practice or daily life, really. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that information.
Oh, you're welcome.
Awesome. So our next, we wanted to also cover the spices that go into our recipe. You can powder the recipe. You can powder the herbs yourself, certainly, but you can also purchase the spices powdered as well. So on that note, I should probably go ahead and ask Neeta about powdering spices, because I do powder my own spices. I prefer to buy the herb in its whole form and grind them in a regular coffee grinder, a small coffee grinder. And these coffee grinders, I can usually find them used at a secondhand store, or actually, I have asked my community, so I'll ask my family or friends if anybody has an old coffee grinder, and actually that's how I got that one year, and that broke, and then the next time I purchased one, and they're only, I think, about the ranges probably anywhere from $15 to $25 for a coffee grinder that you can use as a spice grinder. But yes, you can. I would say that it's the hard spices like cinnamon that really does a number on my coffee grinders. But I wanted to ask Neeta about, first we'll talk about kind of technique, and then we can kind of go into the actual spices and maybe some of their constituents and how effective it could be for us, especially during the winter time. So Neeta, do you have any tips for grinding spices, especially the hard ones like cinnamon and...
Yes, cinnamon is the one spice that I all try to get powdered one, because it's very hard. You can't get the consistency, the fine part of it that is needed. Unfortunately, I do buy that powdered. But anything like cardamom and all these different types of like black pepper and all that, you can still grind it at home. Yes, if you can grind it fresh, of course, it has a lot more nutrients and potency in it. But cinnamon is the one which powdered is fine, yeah.
Cinnamon killed my coffee grinder for sure. One of my coffee grinders.
I'm going to actually try it grinding in the Vitamix. I have this Vitamix blender which also grinds the spices, and I had just recently bought this small part of it. I'm going to try and see how it works in that.
Wonderful. Does anyone else in our group today have any thoughts about grinding your fresh spices, and any tips or things that have not worked as well? I'm curious to hear. You're welcome to put your comments into the chat box, or into, if you'd like to share your voice with us or image, please feel free to do so. How about mortar and pestle? So yes, so I have done the mortar and pestle version, and I think it can be done with a lot of spices. I've actually tried to do that with cinnamon and Ceylon cinnamon. I had a little more success than with other types of cinnamon because it's a little softer bark. But having said that, it took an awful long time, a lot of elbow grease. And in the end, there were nice big chunks that I had to strain out with a strainer. And even then, it wasn't quite fine enough. So I had to resort. So as you suggested, Chris, that I had to put in the mortar pestle and then transfer that to the coffee grinder again, just so they can powder. And it never quite gets that fine powder. And I remember in class also, Cammie had mentioned that cinnamon is one that's a little trickier to get into fine powder. So for that one, she kind of said that it would probably be, it's perfectly fine buying powdered cinnamon, which, of course, all this you can purchase powdered as well. It's just that if you'd like to have the experience of, and you can smell it yourself too, the difference of between having a pre-powdered product versus one that you powder yourself. And I just happen to enjoy the powdering at the moment. But either is totally acceptable and fine. We wanted to talk about some, so maybe that's a good segue to talk about, start talking about each of the spices. So we could actually probably have a whole class on cinnamon, because cinnamon is actually we could probably have a whole class on each of these spices, really. Cinnamon is a flavor I think that many of us are used to, particularly during the winter time. But I know for myself, we also use it in the summer when we're having, let's say, some kind of dessert or something. We might add a dash of cinnamon. I think it's used year round, but I would I think that it's really falls into that kind of fall, winter category very well. It's a warming, wintry spice in my mind. But as someone had mentioned in the chat before, there are different forms of cinnamon. Cinnamon is usually, it's a bark from the tree. The original form of cinnamon, it's indigenous to Sri Lanka, and it's the Ceylon cinnamon. And yes, there are different types of cinnamon. I think there's cinnamon that comes from China. There's cinnamon that comes from Vietnam. There's cinnamon that comes from other regions as well. But those are different types of trees that they are using to make cinnamon. They're different types of trees. And Ceylon is the cinnamon that's often referred to in studies when there are studies done about cinnamon and how it affects our health. So I wanted to make everyone aware of that. There is some discussion about how other forms of cinnamon are not true forms of cinnamon, and they can sometimes be toxic for us in large amounts. But those are the cinnamons that's mostly available and more affordable, are the cinnamons that come from I think the traditional cinnamon flavor that we're used to. But Ceylon cinnamon, if you ever are able to get a fresh Ceylon cinnamon into your pantry, it actually has a slightly sweeter flavor profile to it that I find. And I really enjoy the flavors that Ceylon cinnamon. But when I served it to our friends or with kids, it's definitely a slight shift in the flavor profile where people notice the difference because it's not the one that they're familiar with, maybe because of the other form of cinnamon. So I will say that, Ceylon cinnamon is considered kind of the true cinnamon. And some of the wonderful health benefits that you may or may not be aware is that it helps minimize blood sugar spikes. So cinnamon is often... if we would like to take a more holistic approach to helping our blood sugar spikes throughout the day, you can start with, this would be one wonderful way to consume it, is to be adding the cinnamon into your ghee along with the other spices and consuming that for helping your start to the day. Cinnamon increases circulation. It has antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties to it. It's a wonderful spice herb, I think used a lot for flavorings, but it's often not acknowledged for all the health benefits that it can offer as well. I don't know if you would like to add more to that, Neeta. I would love to hear how you grew up with cinnamon. And I think it's one or a spice that we had spoken about a lot in length because it has helped you as well, right?
Yes. So like you said, that it is... Cinnamon is, of course, one of the biggest, the best quality of it is it lowers blood sugar levels. So that is the reason why it's used a lot more. There are two different types of cinnamon that I kind of know. There is one which is like what you mentioned, the Ceylon ones, which is the Sri Lankan. And there's another one, Cassia.
That's
so
right.
So there are two types. So one is like, and I have seen the difference. And I like the Ceylon one because it is rolled and it is more, it's not as thick as the other one. The other one is not rolled. It is kind of like as if it's like a tree bark of a tree. and it's thick, and it does not. There is completely different flavor profile in it also. So now I prefer having Ceylon because it gives you a better flavor, has better aroma, and actually cinnamon has become one of the most second most popular spice after black pepper.
Wonderful. Yeah, I agree with you. I like the soft texture of Ceylon cinnamon compared to the cassia bark. But a lot of people turn to the cassia bark just because it's a flavor that's familiar to them that they grew up with, because that's generally the one that's used in more mass-produced cinnamon that's often found in the bake shelves. But I really enjoy the flavor of Ceylon cinnamon. So if you are able to find that locally to you, but it's also available online at some stores that deal with spices and pantry goods. So encourage everybody to find that. And also, you can make cinnamon tea too, as part of trying to regulate your blood sugar, and that's a nice tea to have in the morning. I will say that sometimes I used to make a cold brew tea of cinnamon using cinnamon sticks in the cold brew tea, and I would soak it up overnight, and it does come out a little gelatinous, like slightly has a goopy texture. So that's just something to be aware of.
I actually put some cinnamon in my chai tea.
Yeah, I thought cinnamon is often used in chai mix, but is that something that's more, is that individual? Like some people don't use cinnamon in their chai mix and some people do?
Well, there are different types of spices that you can use. I mean, it's not necessary that these are the only spices, but if you buy the chai masala,
mm-hmm.
the spice mix that you get, that actually contains the cinnamon and the cloves and the black pepper and all those, and cardamom and all.
Right.
And we use, in our cooking, we also use it in kind of like curries, or even we'll put like a small stick of cinnamon in the rice also. It just gives a beautiful flavor in the rice also.
Oh, you put it into your rice?
Yes. When you make
so how would you, just really curious, would you do that, sprinkle it on top after, or
no, I just make the stick, not the powder.
Just not the powder, just the stick. Okay.
Just a little bit.
Just to cook it in, to cook the flavor into
you put a little bit ghee and you put this, it just gives wonderful flavor to your rice.
Oh, nice. Is there any other spice that you add to that, or just
I add some cumin.
And I also wanted to mention before I forget, I hope I had mentioned this, but in this recipe, when we mix the powdered spices into the ghee, we're not going to filter out those spices, but once they're mixed in and you actually consume those spices. Someone once had asked me, do I need to filter out those spices? And the answer is no, you can consume them, and that way your body can take in that much more nutrients from the spices. So the next ingredient is fennel seeds, actually. And so fennel, I find it's also helps with the digestion, and it has really wonderful kind of sweet aromatic properties that add to the ghee. And I learned a lot last time talking about fennel with Neeta. So I was wondering, Neeta, would you like to speak to fennel and your experiences and any kind of facts and tips you'd like to share about fennel? And again, fennel, it would be a powdered form of the fennel seed that we're adding in.
Yes. Fennel seeds, I mean, even if you just, the herb itself is just so flavorful and so highly nutritious too. Whether it's the bulb that you're getting, the fennel bulb that you get, or the seeds, everything has great qualities attached to it. This also, fennel seeds is also high in potassium and vitamin C. So this ghee that we have brought with this recipe has such great nutrients attached to it. Like you have great potassium that you get, manganese that you get, and vitamin C. In our culture, fennel seeds is also, which is common after you have your meals. We normally just chew the fennel seeds just for their digestion.
That's right. So I was going to ask about that.
Yes.
Is that what you often find at Indian restaurants by the entrance or exit? They used to have.
They always have the fennel seeds on the side when you're leaving after you have your meals. They will just take a little bit in your spoon, in 1 teaspoon, and take it. And they are so used to chewing it that chewing it, and it helps in your digestion. So
yeah, it's considered. It has antispasmodic properties, but it's wonderful for digestion. I even use the fennel seeds sometimes to make tea. So you often hear me say this, but with some of these individual spices, I'll make tea. I had a friend who made a tea with fennel, cumin, and maybe it was cinnamon, I can't remember, but some other spice when she had an indigestion. And she just, it's such a super simple recipe. She just put just a pinch of cinnamon or pinch of fennel and pinch of cumin. And I believe there was one other ingredient. I think Neeta, we had come across in our conversation as well.
I had actually brought up a recipe when I was doing one of these sessions in my other presentation. And
there's that one too. Yes, right.
One of the digestive teas.
Yes.
And fennel seeds and cumin seeds and coriander seeds was one of the, and there is one more. In Indian, it is called ajwain. But in English, if you look up, it's called Garam seeds or even bishop's weed. These are such great spices that have huge digestive power in it. And if you make it as a tea, you can soak it at night. It is important to soak it at night because once when you soak it, it just brings out those enzymes that benefit. So in the morning when you're just boiling it, making it into a tea concoction kind of a thing, it is really, really very good for your digestive system. If you have any issues of your bloating or gas or stomach issues and all that stuff, those type of teas are just amazing. And fennel seeds is one of the seeds which has really good power of digestion in it.
Wonderful.
And actually, there is one more quality to fennel seeds. It also, if you're pregnant and if you are breastfeeding and all that, actually helps with the increase in the secretion of milk.
I've heard that too. Yeah. It is amazing the power of these small spices that we consider they're such small quantities, but they are, once they're in our system, what they can do. And it's not that it targets that particular part of the body. It's just overall whole body use, really. And it just happens to have more effect on certain parts of our system. So fennel is one of those that's used great for digestion, but also for our nervous system. It's a very calming herb as well. It's a warming kind of calming herb or spice as well. So I don't know if anyone else has any experiences or tips or anything that they want to share about fennel.
Or do you roast it, or because when you go into an Indian restaurant, it's always roasted.
Yes.
But I saved some fennel seeds from my wild plant in the back, and it's fresh. So
there are different types of fennel seeds also. There is some, if you see, there are some which are a little bigger, and then there are some which are very small, kind of thin. Maybe they're more fresher. You can roast it. You cannot roast the ones which are the smaller ones. It just would not come out good. Whereas the one which is kind of a little bigger and which is a little more fatter, I would say, those are the ones that you normally get, of course, in the Indian restaurant and all that. The ones which are the small ones, those are very expensive too. So normally you would not get it anywhere in the Indian restaurant as such.
It's more medicinal. The smaller one is more medicinal, maybe, or just different.
It's just different. It does have more medicinal too, but at the same time, it has different texture to it. It has different flavor to it too, and I think it's more fresher also. So that's the reason why it just is quite more expensive than what you would get the other one. And actually, fennel seeds in India, we have also, like, even when you go to Indian restaurant and you see the roasted fennel seeds, you'll also see some fennel seeds which are in the form of candy. They have already coated it as a candy type of thing. So there are different kinds that they make it just to kind of like, if people just want to eat just like a candy kind of a thing, they can do that too.
I love fennel seeds, and when I was studying herbs, teacher would grab some fresh fennel seeds, and I really got a taste for that nice fresh. So if you want to share with us. I love fennel seeds. And sometimes I'll go for a walk with my kiddo and we grab some seeds as we're walking, and I mean, making sure that it's not sprayed and all that, but it's so wonderful. And then also it's a breath freshener, isn't it, Neeta?
Yes, it is a breath freshener.
Our next ingredient is star anise. I've had an interesting relationship with star anise. I find it quite, the flavor is so strong, and I find that sometimes I overuse it because I think it's so pretty. Star anise has a really beautiful star shaped to it, and I find myself in the beginning, when I was getting to know star anise, that I would use it and I would use too much, and it would just completely overtake the flavor of whatever I was trying to cook. So I now try to use it in less in less proportion and moderation. But star anise is a herb that actually, interestingly enough, it's a precursor to the antiviral compound that's used to manufacture the medication Tamiflu. So it actually has wonderful medicinal qualities to it, and I think it's really a good addition to our holiday spice blend. As you notice, all these spices that we're talking about are good for our digestion. And what often happens during the holidays, right? We eat a lot and we're indoors and we're munching, and our bodies want more kind of, to create more of that layer for us. And so we're eating a lot, and sometimes the indigestion happens for us. So I think a lot of these herbs are not just tasty, but they're also so great for our digestion. They're very supportive, and they help us with really not just digestion, but also with absorption of nutrients and minerals for whatever we eat. So anyway, so it's star anise. Often I think you'll see that it has a sweet licorice flavor, in my opinion, and it's commonly used in sweet applications. But in the Chinese 5-spice blends, you'll often find that star anise is used in that blend as well. So it definitely has savory applications, but I think in the Western, we tend to use it. I can't speak for the Europeans. I mean, but I would say in America, we tend to generally use it has sweet applications to it. But again, we put it in this savory application with the ghee, which I think is kind of interesting. So again, I'm going to turn to my wonderful colleague Neeta for her take on star anise in your culture, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, so star anise in our culture mainly is used in the savory dishes and all. So in fact, like how you said, the Chinese, the 5-spice that you have. So in Indian culture, we have it, we call Garam Masala. And I know a lot of people who know about Indian food know what Garam Masala is. So Garam Masala is all these spices blend together. That is the star anise and the cinnamon and the cloves and the cardamom and the black pepper. All this is mixed and powdered, that is made as Garam Masala. So yes, we use this star anise. There is a dish called biryani. So biryani is basically, it can be, of course, vegetarian, or it can be even the non-veg too, and like a chicken or a meat. We use this a lot, like even in the meat dishes, meat curries but you are not supposed to put all these spices. You are supposed to take just a little bit, not too much, because once when you take too much, then it becomes potent for you, and it's not good. It's not going to help your stomach. So that's how we use quite a bit. And actually we have, I had made one tea, which is really very good with star anise too. So that's what I do. I normally use it for my herbal teas, or we use it more in the savory dishes.
In that herbal tea, do you use, what else? Do you just make a star anise tea, or would you put other spices?
There were a couple other things. I can't remember what was there.
It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. I was just curious if it was one of those single.
No, there was a couple other things in there. So along with star anise. So.
Love it. Nutmeg. Actually, I would love to hear, I don't know if Neeta, I think last time you spoke to nutmeg as well, or would you like me to lead to that?
So nutmeg is also one of the other spices that is used even in the Garam Masala, or nutmeg is used a lot even in our sweet dishes. Like if you make like rice pudding or something like that, love it. You just kind of like grate a little bit on it, and it just gives such a wonderful aroma, and the taste of it is flavor is just amazing. It's just beautiful. So these are all these exotic spices.
I know. I think it's so funny. And nutmeg is such part of our, again, holiday kind of pantry, the flavor. Yes. And I will say that the actual nutmeg is something that that is something that I really enjoy actually having. Well, I enjoy my spices kind of fresh, but nutmeg almost looks like this hard kernel that you can grate right into your food, and it actually breaks down pretty easily when you grate it. I haven't actually tried to powder it in a coffee grinder, but I've grated it against a grater, and it flakes off beautifully. And it's very and oh my gosh, the aroma of freshly grated nutmeg is just. I mean, it's just. I think that's where I tend to overdo it because I'm so overcome with aroma, and I'm like, oh, maybe just a little bit more. And it can really, again, like Anise, kind of, it really can overtake the dish if you're not careful. But I really enjoy grating it and putting it into my dish. And the nutmeg, I think the fun thing about nutmeg is the actual plant, when it's growing, has an outer covering, right? Kind of like this lacy, yellowish covering. And that covering it's separated. And that's actually mace, as I'm sure people do know, but that's actually mace. And so you get a kind of a 2-for-1 in that plant, that you get. But the flavor of mace is quite potent as well. But in this particular recipe, nutmeg. So it's an aromatic spice, has an intense flavor to it. Again, if there's any other people have experiences or stories they'd like to share about any of these spices, I would welcome them.
We went to India, and we went to the southern part of India, and we saw the actual plant of the nutmeg and the mace together. And we bought some nutmeg, and I was very disappointed because it just would not grate. And then I discovered that if I shook it, I realized that there was actually an outer coating, and then the actual nutmeg kernel was actually inside of it. And I had to break that in order to get into, which was very easy. It was very thin, but it was very surprising. And I'm telling you, it was so fresh. I could not believe the flavor of it. If you get it powdered, it just doesn't have the same.
No, it doesn't.
I think it loses that.
Yes.
There's a certain quality to it that's just outstanding.
The oils from the plant, the oils from that is what turns, and so you lose that flavor profile. I completely agree. I can only imagine what a very, very fresh nutmeg or mace might have. So again, it's a very simple recipe, but as you can all see, the many properties of all these spices have really provide a very supportive structure to our digestion and also to our palates. All right, so how do I use the ghee with the spices in them? So you can actually use it for almost anything. And I would also I'm actually tempted, and now that Neeta had mentioned, I'm tempted to use it in my morning beverage. So taking a little bit of ghee, the spiced ghee, and stirring it into the morning beverage. I don't know if this sounds good to anyone else, but I'd like to try that. And you can actually use it on, I'm gluten-free, so I put it on some of my gluten-free toast, and it's fabulous. You can put it on, again, I think it's like a holiday spread. Before I also did want to mention that you can change this spice mix. You can add other spices to it, like cardamom or any other spices, but you can also change the base of it. So it doesn't have to be ghee. You can actually make it with honey if you would like. So if ghee is just too much, then you can actually take these very same herbs and mix them into like a cup or half cup of honey. I think a half cup might be kind of strong, so I would maybe do a cup of honey if you can, and mix the herbs into it. And it will take a while. I generally don't like to warm my honey, but you can warm it just to make the honey a little more mixable, just keep it on a very, very low water simmer, and maybe just enough to slightly warm it so it's a little less viscous, and just kind of you're able to stir the honey and the spices into it. That is also really good, and my kids love that. If you can try mixing the ghee with the honey and the spices. So if your challenge day. So you could try to do maybe like start with like a quarter cup of honey and maybe half a cup of ghee, or maybe 1-to-1, quarter cup and quarter cup of ghee and quarter cup of honey, and then mixing the spices in. And that could also be a very nice kind of honey, caramely, buttery concoction. So that's just, I can also list that as an extension of the recipe for folks to try. But
Chris is asking, how do you bake with it?
How would I bake with it? Have you tried
baking with it?
I think so. I bake with ghee. I haven't tried baking with it, but Chris, you're a great cook, Chris. From what I hear, and I think that I would have fun trying that. I don't know.
It's pretty much the same as butter, right? I mean, it's just a matter of like it's.
Well, it doesn't have the fat solids in it, so that would change the way that it interacted with cookies, for instance, because sometimes baking requires can be unforgiving sometimes, you know what I mean? And sometimes it's very flexible. So.
Another thing that I just thought of, and I'll put this in the recipe as well, I just thought of this, which is why not make this holiday ghee as a protein ball. So, those kind of energy balls that we make, we can mix it with like some dates or not even, I'm thinking of maybe mixing in some almond or chia or hemp thing, mixing it all in the Vitamix really, or by hand, and making, and with coconut as well, and making like little protein balls or something like that. And that could be, because ghee is it gets a little soft and a little malleable, but if you mix it with other ingredients that have more hold, then I think you can make it into because my kids really love just enjoying that ghee on its own too. So I can see that being mixed in with other ingredients and making like protein balls or little I used to call them Zoom bites, but they're like little snacks, really healthy, snacks that fat that will satiate our appetite.
In Bermuda, we lived there for 9 years, and the fennel would just grow wild all over the place, just like everywhere. So you could make fennel tea, but I really didn't make the connection to use the fennel seeds for cooking it, or using the seeds in there. So,
that sounds wonderful. I love fennel.
From the part where I am from India, we actually put fennel seeds in there for the tea.
Thank you so much to both of you. This was really a fun workshop and just so many takeaways. So thank you to both of you for sharing your knowledge with us.